Oh, baby. Today we're talking about everybody's favorite legend. That's right. Gilbert, Gibraltar, Gibby, Jibby, whatever you want to call this Chungus, that's who the video is going to be focusing on because the devs were talking about him over on Reddit. Now, this kind of flew under my radar for a little bit. This is actually about like 48 hours old, so like 2 days old by now, because it was just a random comment left underneath one of the Reddit threads that somebody posted about over on the subreddit. But we're going to actually go through because the devs talk about how they definitely are not going to be nerfing Gibby at all. If anything, he might actually be seeing some buffs because data doesn't support that he's overpowered. But we're going to make our way through each of this dev's points. Now, this is somebody named Daniel Z. Klein who has the designer badge over on the Apex Legends subreddit. So this is a guy who actually 100% is confirmed to work with Respawn. So we're going to go through his points individually. I'm going to talk about whether I agree with them or disagree with them, or at least try to find some middle ground between how it feels as a Wraith player or a Pathfinder coming up against a Gibby, because you have that like pretty severe difference in health. Because if you weren't aware, with both Gilbert and Caustic, they take 5% less damage. Additionally, Gibby also has his arm shield and he has his bubble, so he has a lot of defensive measures, but that's kind of the point of his character. So, you know, we'll go through and we're going to talk about these points, but let's just get started on it. So this dev, Daniel Klein, says that totally makes sense on paper, in reference to somebody talking about how much they despise Gibby, but the data does not bear it out at all. Gibraltar performs very poorly in terms of encounter win rate. Sure, in that moment where you have to burn through all that health, it feels extremely unfair, but it's offset by a few factors. And now we're going to get into his reasoning for why Gibby is definitely not going to be getting a nerf, and if anything, he's going to be getting a little bit of a buff. So his first point is that all of his stuff is hyper visible from range. His gun shield, his dome, his bombardment, all of them give away his position. So I actually have a number of issues with this point, but I'm at least going to go through and say that it does make sense what he's saying. Gibraltar definitely is visible from pretty far, especially with his gun shield, but that doesn't matter because it's offset by the fact that if you're trying to shoot at him from range, or if you're having a sniper battle with a Gilbert, he has that advantage because he can eat an entire bullet. Even if it was going to be a headshot, he can just slurp that bullet right up. And so it doesn't matter that you can see him because you can't hurt him anyway. And the idea that he's hyper visible from range, I don't think that really holds up because there are a lot of characters who have abilities that give away their position, whether it be Wraith's phase, where you can see her moving while she's invisible, or the sound of Wraith's portal, Bloodhound's tactical ability, which like everyone on the map can see their positioning when they hit their Ben 10 watch, Lifeline's passive, where when she's rezzing you can see the shield. All this stuff is super visible, and I know some of my points were actually about sound, but I'm talking more about like if you're a little bit further away from them, you can still be aware that they're there. So I don't think Gibraltar has any uniqueness in that aspect, that he is visible from range. Additionally, I think it's the same thing with his bombardment as it is with Bangalore's ultimate. In fact, Bangalore's ultimate, and I know you guys love to fight with me on this point about how her ultimate is supposed to be used for something entirely different, but it still has that same degree of visibility where there's like hit markers on the ground and like hit markers over the whole area. And so everybody knows and everybody can hear where that ultimate is going to be. But moving on, it says Dome is one of those super neutral abilities. If the enemies close the distance and they're better at the game than you are, your dome will actually be a detriment. That's fine and fair, but it explains why the dome isn't just this big I win ability. And I do agree with this point, actually. I agree with this point a lot because I've actually played against a lot of Gibraltars, and even myself, like, you can tell when you go up against a Gibraltar if it's just somebody who's trying to get their like quest mission out of the way, if they have to play for like a bombardment kill or assists or something like that. You can tell based on how they use their shield whether or not they're a good player. And my thing with all of his points really is that it's super fine and dandy for your average Gibraltar player who's just like skilled with a different legend and is playing Gibraltar for whatever reason. But for anybody who is like fairly good or really good with Gibraltar, they have a significantly greater chance of winning that encounter. And I know you can make the point and say, well, if you're really good with any legend, you have the ability to win more encounters than somebody who's average. But my point being able to use the shield effectively in combination with crouching and your arm shield and just having that additional 5% of health, you really, if the playing field was totally even, like as far as skill, the Gibraltar would win more encounters because it just takes that much longer to kill them. So yes, I do agree that as just an ability, the Dome Shield isn't an insta-win for the team who has the Gibraltar. In fact, when we're running a Gibraltar on our team, usually we actually use it more of an escape method where we'll like create space, put the shield down, heal up for a couple seconds because you do get that healing buff inside, which is a point that we're going to talk about in a second, and then run away with the bubble in between us and the people who are shooting at us. So there are definitely a lot of different ways that you can use the bubble. The more creatively you use it, the better it is, at least in my opinion. So while I do agree that for a fairly average player, it's a neutral ability, but for a better player, I think it actually can be used very, very, very effectively to win more encounters. So I mostly agree with your point here. But moving on to the next one, finally, and by far the most important, he has a big hitbox. Honestly, that hitbox probably explains 90% of his low encounter win rate. Why don't you guys just like change how much armor he's wearing in his character model? Like, I get that he's a bigger guy, but like he's got mad armor on. Like in some of his skins where he's showing skin, like his one that came out a while back, in like the solos mode, I believe, where he's like a god. He's got like mad thick armor on. Like, I don't know. I feel like they could, if they're really that worried about this low encounter win rate and that his hitbox is the reason for it, like nobody's gonna call you out and be like, you're a terrible developer for making this legend slimmer. Like maybe people are gonna do that, but that's just stupid. Like, if you got to take into account the actual game and how it's affecting the game if you genuinely think that the hitbox is the reason that you have to like make him overpowered in other areas, which in and of itself is kind of confusing to me because other games do this totally fine. Like take a look at Roadhog in Overwatch. Roadhog has consistently been one of the best heroes in that game. Way back in the day when I used to play Overwatch, I loved playing Roadhog because even though he had health that was the same as the other tanks, he had an ability set that felt very fair. Obviously, just by the nature of that game, which is obviously far different than Apex, just because of the fact that you could respawn. But the devs over at Blizzard still found a way to make those abilities feel balanced in that when you were coming up against a Roadhog, it didn't feel that unfair. I'm sure whatever statistics that this guy is looking at is 100% accurate. Like, I'm sure the encounter win rate for Gibraltar is actually very low. And while I'm not encouraging there to be like a huge Gibraltar nerf, it just feels like in some areas the amount of bullets that you have to dump into him is pretty astounding. There was a video that came out on Reddit probably like a month or so ago where somebody recorded them emptying a full R99 mag into Gibraltar's arm shield and then him one-shotting them in the face with a sentinel. And I feel like that just kind of sums up the experience of trying to 1v1 a Gibraltar. Now, I'm more accepting of Gibraltar's kit now that Lifeline is getting pretty much a full overhaul at this point, at least as far as we can tell. I've talked a lot about Lifeline in my previous videos though, which if you haven't seen, I will link in the top right hand corner. But I just want to read the last little bit where it says, what actually is out of whack for him is fast res in the dome. I'm pretty sure, but it's the least obvious thing when you're the enemy. But as I said, I'm a lot more accepting of him being able to have those healing abilities now that Lifeline is back on top as like the real combat medic, if you will. So I'm honestly okay with Gibraltar right now. That's probably the first time I've ever said that on this channel, but you know, my main thing with Gibraltar was that he was stealing all of Lifeline's thunder and he was doing it better. But now that Lifeline kind of has her own kit again, I'm more accepting of it. Quite honestly, I've seen very, very few Gilberts in Season 5 so far, and the data does support that. He's one of the least picked legends now with about a 3% pick rate, at least from the last time I checked up on that about 3 or 4 days ago. So he's definitely suffering a little bit, and I think at some point he's going to have some bit of a rework done to him. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but as I mentioned previously, if they just like wiggle around his hitbox a little bit, thin him out just a tiny bit, then I think that they could get away with doing a little bit different things with his abilities, because they won't be held back by the fact that you could shoot him from across the map with a P2020 and land your bullet. In fact, that might actually be the best way to shoot at him, because he won't know where you are to put his ridiculous shield up in front of his face. However, as I mentioned, definitely no nerf coming to Gibby in the near future. In fact, if anything, we'll probably be getting a rework. That's going to be it for me for this video for today though, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button before you head out, as that will really help this video. And if you're not already and you'd like to join the club, make sure to hit that red subscribe button. And again, thank you guys we're already almost at 21,000 subscribers. So again, thank you guys so much for all of that. That's going to be it for me for this video, guys. So until tomorrow, take it easy.